Today, our focus is going to be on security and security on the computer side of things. I see Wayne is with us, and he may have some things to say. And Ken had written me a note earlier. He had some good observations. But it is getting harder and harder to keep sites secure. In fact, one of the reports I read this past week about how organizations are shifting from just prevention to a quicker detection of threats. But right now, the average for that is like 200 days. And better visibility of systems is crucial. And this is something that's really driving the IT departments nuts. Black Fog reports that the unsustainable pressure on cybersecurity leaders, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, has made many of them worried about the rise of AI-enabled cyber attacks and other things like that that are going to cause them more hours of work. It seems that there says nearly all of the high-end cyber folks are working beyond their contracted hours and ready to quit. So we don't know what that's going to happen. But the biggest thing that we can do is not just catalog mistakes that are out there, which we will do, uh, but talk about some things we can do that will protect our facilities and the information. Uh, what was it? The Odyssey stations in Chicago had a switch problem a week or so ago. All the stations went silent. I don't think that was a hack problem from what I've read. It was a switch problem, but that could be too. And everybody keeps talking about how the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians are all looking to find ways into our power plants and our water treatment facilities to see if they can sabotage those. And that's going to be something we'll get to in another way as well. But let's start with mistakes. The biggest mistake that anyone can make is to assume that the worst will not happen to them, that they're in good shape, they watch what they're doing, they're reasonably careful. But, if you don't have the right anti-malware protection, it's like leaving your door open and your wallet on the top of the table. Now, Jeff Welton has commented several times over the years about how Nortel has tested. And in fact, they can put a transmitter up, connect it to the internet, and how long do you think it would take for the first hacker to find it? Anyone want to make a guess? Anyone remember?
Well, if they know about you, it won't take. It'll take a lot longer or a lot less longer to find you. Uh, but I remember Jeff got into one of my transmitters, and I said, "But that's the channel you're supposed to have access to." And he said, "I'll get back to you on that."
Well,
And I just kept it off. I didn't leave it online.
uh-huh. Well, certainly we have heard from the Shodan uh, research that some have done that there are literally hundreds of things wide open, even in the broadcast industry. Many of the Sage EAS units were noted. There were some DASDEC units that were noted to be open, and the company tried to contact the stations. 19 seconds, 17 to 19 seconds. And this was a transmitter we just put up. Might have been a computer. In any event, it was something at Nortel that they just plugged into the internet. And that is how long it took for the first bot to find them and start to attack. So protecting from malware is so important. It's not just a virus or a Trojan anymore. There are the keyloggers, there's the rootkits, there's the ransomware. There is now the desire to steal data and put that up for ransom. And it occurs to me that Larry Wood may have something to say about that because that happened to him or his station. I know that we have a couple of stations here in Tucson where the ransomware guys got in and wrecked things. I know a chain in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and Maryland, among other places. I forget exactly how many stations. They got hit, and the ransomware went right up their system through their whole network, and they went round and round and round and round. And I don't remember now exactly why it was, but they didn't clean their machines. And something like 60 days later, they got hit again. What can you say? The authorities all say don't pay the ransomware guys. Don't pay these things because it just encourages them. But some companies do, and it's a shame. Passwords. Start on the mistake side. What's the most common password there is out there?
2, 3, 4.
You all know it.
Password.
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 Password and let me in.
And then right after that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Mm-hmm.
ABC 1, 2, 3. And what's the second big mistake that users do with their passwords?
Save them.
Use
Put
them
them on a Post-it note next to the equipment.
Well, that's one thing, yeah, but using them on multiple sites so that all your accounts have the same password. Now, that's nice and convenient, but here's the problem. And I wrote about this. It's on the site. If you look under articles and IT admin, there is an article on password security that talks about what's happened with these big breaches that you read about. Because what happens then is their goal is to find the encrypted file with passwords. Now, what can they do with that, you say? It's encrypted. But they know that there's a bunch of people out there using password as a password. And so all they do is they do a dictionary attack, run through all the different names that they can find, and sooner or later, one of them will pop up with password. And then they decrypt the whole file. Now that they have that file decrypted, they can come over to another server in another company, another place. If your Gmail account has the same password as your Yahoo account or your account on Amazon, now all of a sudden, these guys will come in and they can access your account. So it's not a matter of how tremendously complicated your password is. Have a sentence like the big bad wolf says boo, and you change these zeros to an O's to a zero, and sort of things like that. Turn another letter into a number, put an exclamation point in there. You can do all that. You can buy the password manager programs. At least they'll try to tell you to do a different password on different sites. But if you use that same password in more than one place, there is a very big danger that these guys can come after you. Now, it's instructive to know that there are websites devoted to understanding this and letting you know if your password is out there in the open or your email username has been compromised. Again, I put them in an article, and they're not too hard to find on the internet. Am I Pawned is probably one of the most famous, and you can put your address in there and find out. So when you have these passwords and you hear that the company you're with could be your insurance company, could be your cell phone company. You read about these all the time. And if you find out that one of these is hacked, it's a good time to stop and change your password there and maybe in other places too. What about 2FA? Two-factor authentication. Man, oh man, that is a pain in the butt if you don't have your cell phone next to you or your email is not instantaneous. I was working on one of the sites the other day that I needed to get some information from. And for some reason, I have no idea why, but it said my password didn't work. So what do? You look around, you try the password, and then you push the I forgot my password. So the site offers to send an email to you. Problem is, if they don't send that email immediately or it gets hung up somewhere through the chain, you'll end up getting that code too late to get back in. And what was really weird in this case was after I got the code and got back in, I went, looked under account. Yep, it was the right password. Their system was all messed up. But there you are. So 2FA, at least it gives you the understanding and the capability that they will send this out to the registered telephone or email, and then you can verify who you are. And some sites say, accept this particular IP address in the future. And that's probably fairly safe. Maybe one of you guys are going to say, no, don't do that because that IP address could be faked. Almost anything can be faked on the internet these days, and that's sad. But if you want to be really secure, doing that 2FA. Do I do it on all my accounts? No, I really don't. I'm not so worried about some of them. Many of them are just shopping sites or a YouTube site, and if that crashes, okay, I'll go and do something else.
Barry, didn't we see or hear either on one of your luncheons or maybe it was an IEEE piece that we're walking into the application of triple checks now?
There are some places that do. The one of the Native American stations that I have tried to help makes you log in through a Cisco system, and then you log in through another system that it comes after you get the code on your phone to allow the first system. It can get complicated. So the best thing is good firewalls. There are some folks that think that using specific MAC addresses as being the only ones allowed in. But again, the most competent hackers probably can forge a MAC address. Some people think security by obscurity. They make it hard for people to find the right IP address for their equipment. But these bots are out there. We had a bot somehow, this goes back to very early this year or late last year, someone found the radiolist.net address of our alternate frequency mailing list. And we have the broadcast list, we have the tech assist list, We have a history list and things like that. Thousands of attempts to register on the alternate frequency every single day. It was just impossible. And we ended up having to do a few things, one of which was we instituted I think it was called Fail to Ban or something, and another program that looked at these, and if they came in from obviously cranked addresses, it would be rejected. But I put the whole thing on a manual system for a while until we got it solved, and then it stopped. But it's so quick. If they find a way into your system, man, oh man, it can happen overnight and you get flooded.
Talking about 2FA, this would be applicable to this group. I used an SBE.org address as the email address to send a 2FA thing to if I got locked out of an account. It was actually a Facebook account, and it doesn't work. That's a remailer address, and so it goes to your whatever email you tell it to go to. But I never did get the email ever that they supposedly had sent to that address.
That's not entirely impossible. In fact,
Yeah.
as some of you know, we have been fighting an issue with Apple lately. For those who have a .me, .iCloud, or what's the other big one that Apple has? They've been bouncing everything from the BDR.net newsletters and such. And I finally got through to one of their departments, and they said, "Well, you guys have malware." And I said, "No, we don't." I said, "You are the only one that's blocking us." So for the last week or so, I've been sending out an email to the folks with the list of www.thexdr.net. And I said, just replace the X with a B. And most everybody's gotten the newsletter the last couple of weeks. So there are ways around some of these things. And for these companies to play games with their filters, it's not always good. But you want to keep your Windows up to date. You want to keep your software up to date because these exploits are out there. There are bad actors who can get in. I think what happened to a system that I'm aware of is a user who is no longer working there, and they did not delete his account. Well, some other system got hacked. They found his password, and they dropped in, and then they corrupted a site. So you want to keep your software up to date, your Windows or your Mac up to date, and of all things, keep your permissions of who can access your system up to date. Speaking of
Barry,
yes,
if I can jump in. So I think I mentioned probably a couple of months ago that I got hacked on my laptop that I was using, and got ransomware. And I saw it happen and pulled the plug because I'm wired on the network. I pulled the plug in about 10, maybe 15 seconds, but still lost about 190 files. We think we figured out what happened, and it's weird. So I have malware that runs in the OS on the laptop, but one of the functions of this corporate laptop was a stay resident program that would bring up on the screen, without even starting the computer, your company's protected web email server. So at any time when you're in the field with a fingerprint, it would just open up and you could see all your emails. That as a function had been changed once the laptop became my property from the previous owner, a corporation. And what I didn't know was that it was functioning in the background, looking for email without the malware protection running, because the malware ran in the OS and this was a non-OS function. And so we figured it out yesterday that the bad whatever it was, email or whatever, had gotten into the system and then stayed resident in the background for a while. And then when I was fired up and moving files around, that's when it functioned. So I don't know how you protect it except for to make sure that that ancillary lookout, which is not going through any type of protection at all and is supposed to only go to a protected site. And there must be a lot of computers out there. It's a standard HP function on the corporate laptops that they put out about 10 years ago.
Well, it certainly is enough to give you a need to be careful, to keep your systems clearly up to date. And when you hear about a uh, first day attack or something like that, make quick arrangements. Now, that of course has its own little, um, how shall I say, a potential problem, uh, because all too often some of these companies that put up these fixes for a first day attack, they put up something that's buggy and it gets worse. So you really have to be careful. And Roland, this thing about employees getting phished. This is something that I'm going to talk about in a moment, unless you would like to talk about it right now. The AI is making phishing much more critical because social engineering is where many of these hackers get a free pass, get a way in very quickly. And now with AI that can replicate voices, it's going to make things even harder. I have an article that I'll be posting in the next week, most likely, about the issue of getting email from people you know that turns out not to be from people you know. Now, I can change the name on the from very easily in sending email to you. Any one of you here on the list right now that would like an email from Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, I could do that. Now, if you really got deeply into and looked at the headers, you would know immediately. But let's just talk about this, that maybe it's your bookkeeper or maybe it's your general manager. And you get an email that says, look, we need to take care of this project right away. Click on this and review the form. Well, it could be from somebody who's forged the name. It could be a virus that you're now clicking on, or ransomware, or worse. And so this particular person, and again, you'll find the article interesting. He looked and he said, well, I know this person. Why would they send me this email on this day? And you have to be a little more critical. And so,
And if it looks weird, call him.
yeah, especially if it comes from Ken Fine. Ken's number is 55. Oh, never mind. But that's right. You should be This is a problem with the new generation X and Z. They don't like telephone calls. They would rather text. And because of that, they get into this habit that when text comes into them, they'll react to that rather than to take the step that Ken just mentioned and verify the identity of who's sending them what before they click on it. Now,
One of the companies that I used to work for, besides a yearly review and tests that we had to take for just these kinds of things. The IT department would monthly send out a fake email of one kind or another to see how many employees they could catch at it. And if you fell for it, they said, well, haha, you fell for it. And then you had to retake the training course again on basic personal IT security. So that was, like I said, one proactive step that one of the companies I worked for used to do.
That is a sneaky but smart thing to do. I can't find a fault with that. You just don't go down and slap their hands physically, but
We actually have a company that we engage who does that for us, and we have a fish alert on our outlooks. So if we suspect something's a fish, we could put it into the fish alert. If it actually was one of those tests, you get a congratulations message. If it was, and if you did fall for it, then same thing that the other fellow said was that you get to be retrained.
yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? What about software? I just mentioned keeping your software up to date, but that involves two aspects, whether it's a brand new piece of software or one that you're updating, and that's downloading it. And have you ever noticed on so many sites now that for you to get a file, you've got to go through an endless series of next or okay buttons? And sometimes if you just mindlessly click through them, you have actually put your name on a mailing list, or you've got some other program that they want to feed to you, or many other things like that. And so when you're downloading, you want to be very, very careful. Yeah, some IT departments make it impossible to download files. And then you have to go through them to get it into your machine, and then you have to wait for them. But sometimes, if they failed that test that Ed was just talking about, maybe that's appropriate if that's a problem. Another thing to check is the Wi-Fi. Is your Wi-Fi locked down? Did you just change your Wi-Fi out because you wanted to upgrade to the G or five gigahertz? Or did you lose a Wi-Fi and then you got out there and bought a new one and put it in because the day was still running and forgot to change from the default password? It's something to take a look at. It's sort of like, I think of it in terms like this. How many of you, and I'm sure that if I asked for hands, I wouldn't get very many. How many of you have checked the frequency of your transmitter in the last month? We used to do it every month, didn't we? Hired a company to check our frequency and send us a little note that we stapled to the log and find out if we're more than 20 hertz off on an AM or 2 kilohertz on an FM. Most people don't do that anymore because with the solid state transmitters, they rarely drift. And if they do drift, sometimes it's really bad. But other times, you wouldn't know. Same thing.
Mike Langner talked me out of that. He said he was doing our self-inspection one time, and he says, "What are your frequencies?" And I said, "They're written on the transmitters." And he didn't think that was very funny. And he said, "Go buy you a counter and do it at least before the next inspection," but I'd do it more often. So he showed me where to get a $45 counter. It was accurate up to a couple of gigs. And I did it about 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, that's quite true. And it's actually probably another thing that we ought to do an article on because the cost of a decent, not down to the single hertz accuracy, but a decent frequency counter has come down very, very much and is very well within the budgetary capability of a station or a cluster. But the point we're getting to is like the frequency, check your Wi-Fi and your password there. There are one more that I want to mention before I get into the really crazy one here. Some websites that you end up on, and you might think that, how did I get here? Well, you had just searched something on Google or DuckDuckGo. And you get to a website, and all of a sudden there's a screen that says, you have been hacked. Call Microsoft service at this number, and we'll help you. That's a scam. It doesn't work. All they want is your credit card number, and they want to mess with you big time. Mr. Miller, we had a new chief engineer respond to an email from the station owner saying, don't call me, just do such and such. He was too new to know that the owner absolutely insists on in-person phone calls or all communication concerning these things. And, well, the bad guy went out, used gift cards on the company credit card. Thank you for that. So here is one that Ken commented to me privately this morning, and we can discuss a little bit. What is the solution, especially for your mission critical things? Some people think it's an air gap. What's an air gap? It's when there are no physical or IP connection between two computers or your computer and the internet. Some people would like to think that their control room automation is air gapped and therefore safe. Well, I'll tell you a story, and then I'll tell you, well, I'll start out by the news story that started by thinking in this way. A persistent threat group has breached an air gap governmental system in Europe. They used custom malware, and they managed to steal data. How could they do that if it's air gapped? They used USB drives, flash drives. And somebody got an infected flash drive, went to work, stuck it in the machine. The machine got infected and then called out to the bad guys and delivered it to the flash drive. About 20 years ago, I was doing standby work for a company that was here in town. And I found out some real problems with their systems. And it happened that I went to visit their headquarters and was in the office of their chief engineer and IT officer. And I said, I brought a flash drive here with the information on it. And he said to me, well, you can send it to me after you get back home. Why? Not one USB port in that entire cluster worked. They were all glued shut, or the wires had been pulled off the back. Turns out that sometime previously, one of the accountants for the company had come through and downloaded material, and the flash drive was found laying on the street in Chicago, a different city, hundreds of miles away. And their solution was to disable every single one of the USB ports. Now, you know, we have type A, type B, type C now. We have the Wi-Fi. So it's not as simple in protecting, but you've got to look at these different things and see if you can prevent them from being breached.
Well, that the USB drive was what got Stuxnet into the Iranian centrifuges.
Mm-hmm. You
I
don't have,
believe USB drives were also an issue with the U.S. Military. Don't remember like 2 or 3 years ago seeing some notes about the military absolutely banning flash drives to be attached to anything, anywhere.
There is protocol you can use for that. I heard just today, I think, how they're protecting the voting machines this year. They are never connected to the network or the internet. The one machine that's on its little network at each voting station, when it's done, they get a brand new sealed flash drive, load it to that times two, and two different people in a little lock box drive it down to the voting headquarters. And that's about as good as you can get, I think.
well, here's the problem, and maybe we have some folks here who will share some solutions. Let's assume that your playout system is your mission critical system. Can you air gap it? Well, yeah, if you never change any of the spots, or you never change any of the music, or you never change any of the liners. Because what about the traffic computer? What about the production computer? What about all the other sales and management people that want to load things up? So how do you handle that? You
We
can't
had
use,
two separate networks to handle that, and only the isolated network was allowed to be on the internet, and that was only allowed to salesmen. And the rest of the in house stuff had to be hand delivered and checked and then hand loaded into a system that got to the automation and the logging and all of that. And you could still sneak stuff in, but it would have to be somebody in house doing it.
or somebody who wasn't paying attention. If you brought a
Well,
file in, whether it be from traffic or production or somewhere else, somebody has to sit there and run it through a virus detection system, right?
Yep.
How else would you do this? Anyone want to share?
I would think that anything coming from the outside would has to be checked. If it's an audio file, make sure it really is an audio file, and disparate systems have to be separated from each other through firewalls and things of that nature. So you're only accepting something specifically from that IP address and that port, things like that. Yes, there's always a way for an employee to find some way to walk in with a flash drive, a portable hard drive, what have you, and try to connect to the back of the machines. I know in our case, the machines used to be in a locked rack, so the casual person could not, get to the physical machine itself. But different systems certainly have to be isolated from each other through firewalls and things of that nature.
And if an employee were to come in and usually it's laziness, oh, I don't have time, I'll just put this on a flash drive and load it into my production room machine. Our system kept a track of what was loaded when. And if something did occur, we could at least punish people.
But the key point here is that, as Ed so clearly showed, you can have a new employee in the traffic or bookkeeping department, and they could click on an email or something, infect themselves, and immediately destroy your on-air computer.
Well, it's not easy. And you also have to have your automation manufacturer to be able to get into the machine. And we tried to be cautious, call them first, set up an appointment. We'll isolate that machine and then they can get into it. But of course, time's money, and people think, we'll take the chance.
The
We
chance?
found most often we ran into security or laziness issues. It was the seasonal intern of some full-time employee who has been given the full-time employee's password and things of that nature, and not being a full-time employee, came in and decided they would be more clever than the next person in terms of trying to get something into or out of the machine. But sharing passwords, especially prominent employees, giving interns and whatnot the password because the intern couldn't remember their own password was one of the most common problems that we had around our facility.
And if you have a very, very tight facility, that too boils back to laziness because somebody didn't follow the protocol.
If you are in a cluster, it's quite likely there is an IT person. And if you're a very small mom and pop station, this may be much more difficult to accomplish. But I've heard several times about situations where a single computer is what collects the material from traffic and production and everywhere else. And one person, his assignment is to run that computer and run anti-malware on everything that comes in to make sure that it's clean. And then that third computer is allowed to connect to the control room. A little more work, a little more effort, maybe isolating to a certain individual. And if they're not there that day because they're sick, well, you want, just like with the chief operator, you want to have an assistant. But it can be done.
Well,
Yeah,
we had separate servers to achieve that. We had the server for the programming and the station equipment. Then we had the server that all the other departments and sales and everybody else was on, and they were isolated.
about 8 years ago, I had a reason to question the music library of a station, and I had the chance to talk to an IT person at a medical facility that was connected by fiber to their satellite offices around the Portland, Oregon area. And he said, "You're in luck. Each one of our facilities has a server that was called a Barracuda. It's actually the name on it. And its sole purpose was just to go through files before it was into the system for anything." And he said that ran like 25 different checks from different software manufacturers looking for things. But he went through the hard drive that I had for the music library, and it was loaded with malware and whatnot. And that was his suggestion: is do what the medical people do is, and they're required by federal statute to do what he was said they were doing. But like what Ken said, you just have a server that's sole purpose is ingestion, and it looks through everything before it makes it available to either the rest of the isolated systems. I'm not too sure what that actually means, but at least into the system, everybody goes through one big, check system.
And you have to make sure your check system is up to date and correct. I don't know if you have the Kaspersky lab antivirus system on your network. If you do, it isn't there anymore because the company very quietly, at the end of September, took the application off, shut it down, and then remotely installed a little-known alternative called Ultra AV, which does not have the reputation that some shops would like to have. But if you had Kaspersky, it isn't there anymore. Just disappeared one day. And that's how that
Was
happened.
that the thing that hit the banks a while back?
Well, it's a Russian one, and so
Oh, no, it wouldn't be
there
the
were
ones.
there were rumors, and that's That's why the government started to ban it. Roland, have I pretty much hit the things that you had in mind? Sort of just give you a chance to speak up if you want. I guess so.
Now, were the music files corrupt, or were there malware files also on that flash drive?
Oh,
Right.
Um, I actually asked for a copy from the PD. Just make me a copy, and then we went off and looked at it, file after file after file. And this was done in the background. I mean, I basically gave the hard drive to the guy, and because his server was coming out of a facility, it was not, not attached to anything. It was just sitting on a, on a tech bench someplace. And so he just said, I got time. Let me run it through it. And by the next morning, he just said 60% of the music files had something in them, and the files came from all over the place. It was a focused effort of two or three former music PDs from different stations putting things together. So we really don't have any way of knowing where it came from, but getting it cleaned up and still being able to read the music files was the easy task. Getting the powers that may be to understand how they opened whatever doors that they did and then replace the music library with a clean copy was essentially impossible. There were just too many political things involved. And so I needed to stand back from that station. And you can only advise, um, even in my ignorance, I could only advise so many things. And if they weren't going to follow that, I just didn't feel
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
needed to be responsible for their problems.
A little over 20 years ago, at Clear Channel, we were using Klotz consoles, German consoles, and the software for the consoles was updated. And the problem was the update contained a virus. And by the time that we had discovered what's going on, Ed Bukant was involved in that. Something on the order of 250 viri were all through the system. Fortunately, that was a different network, the Novell system, as opposed to the Windows system for email and Office and such. But it was a mess. I remember trying to get those consoles back up. We were stringing Cat5 cable through the hallways to the different rooms, and it was just crazed. The AI that we talked about earlier, I have one more thing that I'll mention, and then I'm going to toss it and see if we have any other comments that want to be made. And that is that the AI generated voice is now a part of a number of elaborate phishing scams. And this one that I read about from a tech-oriented venture capital firm had to do with Google support. You got a call from Google support. The ID, the caller ID said Google support. And then he got a public service announcement from Google. And they were checking to see if the user was alive because a death certificate had been issued in his name. And so this whole thing was designed to allow password recovery by clicking on the link that was put out there. But the deal was that using AI, they could simulate the voice of somebody that he knew. And it took him a while to figure it out, but fortunately, he did not get burned. Wayne, I know you're still there. At least I saw you a minute ago. Are you aware of anything I missed here?
No, I think all been very good points. Clearly, the cybersecurity for the broadcast station has become a lot more complex, and certainly there's no longer really just a single solution. We used to think all we had to have was a firewall, but certainly that's clearly not adequate anymore.
Yeah, quite true. And especially when you consider that we're not just talking about the control room, and I keep mentioning the mission critical playout system, but the transmitter site is all IT connected these days, as is the codec that gets the audio out there, as maybe the audio processor. You can, with some stations, uh, get on your computer, and you can see 4, 5, 6 pieces of gear. Not to mention the building itself, the air conditioning system, or lighting system, or the generator system. And all these can be vulnerable if you do not set it up carefully with a firewall, yes, but with software and intelligent layouts. And again, I just have to mention that for the smaller market stations, uh, that may be a lot. And when the FCC wants to issue a requirement for radio stations to develop a cybersecurity policy and to send it to them and then to update it periodically, that doesn't look into the real world. I certainly hope this doesn't come to fruition.
No, it doesn't. Certainly, I think it's good to have that security policy, but not necessarily means it needs to be a formal policy that you have to draft and make that a submission to the FCC. Your comment about the transmitter side, I always find is interesting. Well, how do you treat the transmitter side? Do you treat that as a separate side? Do you treat that as an integral part of the, let's say, studio network? And, there's always that balance there. You can create a very, very secure environment, but that also translates into a very difficult environment to use or to implement the workflows. So you really have to have this balance between your business function, the workflows that you need to do, and the security for that. The example, the discussion about the content, getting it into the automation system. Certainly, I think having that quote proxy server was discussed is really the most practical way where you can scan that. In other words, you're never letting that automation computer really being the one that is scanning documents, executing documents. That's done externally.
Yes, yes. And although I haven't heard of a recent example, it has happened more than 1 or 2 times where hackers have worked their way into a barracks box and replaced the program audio with, I guess it was a profanity-laden rap thing. And I know one was in Texas where this happened, and it took them a fair amount of time to get that off the air. They lost control of their transmitter as well.
Well, just fairly recently, in preparation for one of my many presentations I've done, I discovered a barracks box that didn't, it had default login credentials in it using Shodan. And I just stumbled upon that because I was capturing some screenshots for a presentation. And by God, that was the decoder for an FM station up in the Northeast. And obviously, what could I have done? Well, I could have simply take the station, at least audio wise, off the air by stopping that player. But I also could have repointed that player at,
Yep.
an encoder of my choice. And of course, if I do that, I'm going to want to then go put some my own login credentials into that decoder. So it's pretty scary. Early on, we're discussing how long does it take for a device to be discovered. Well, one of the interesting statistics I ran across is of estimates of between about 42 and nearly 50% of the internet traffic is basically bots that are scanning and looking for things. And a study done by Akamai pointed out about 65% of that 42% of bots, they were
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Wayne. I muted you trying to get rid of that phone thing, and it's my fault. Uh,
Oh, I'm not sure where I was. But I think my main point, a comment about the scanning of the public internet and how long it takes for a device to be discovered.
right.
I've seen some statistics that came from Akamai that about 42% of the internet traffic is bots scanning devices or looking for devices. And a good 65% of those were basically hostile or nefarious in nature.
Yes. Yes. Quite so.
Wayne,
All right, I apologize for the.
jumped me on this, but I was just about to bring up the barracks boxes. That's something you are better off not putting on your system unless it's just strictly in-house, because those things are too easily hackable, particularly hooked to the internet.
Oh,
They're
absolutely. I'm not, in this presentation, I wasn't really intended to pick on barracks, but I use barracks quite often because when you take Shodan, and in fact, I could show you the slides, but it came up with 2,400 and some odd devices that are on the open internet. And well, how many am I going to sit there and try 2,400 default logins? No, I'm not going to do that. I got lucky and stumbled upon one out of the few I checked.
You're going to set a bot up for it.
Well, that's a script running in whatever
Exactly.
program. And
Wayne,
what
could I
you
ask you to show us that screen? And Mark, you had something. I think you had something you wanted to say. And so, if you'll say that, and if Wayne will be so kind to come back and show us a little showdown.
I was just going to comment. My transmitter site is on my LAN, just like all the stuff out there is on the LAN, just like it was here. The only trick I do on that is I do have a red cable. If I unplug that, then it isolates it, except the UDP stuff to get the audio there is on a separate device and network. So I stay on the air. But the tower is just another office as far as the LAN is concerned. That can be good and bad.
Well, I had a 5 gig Ubiquity link that had to do like a 3 mile STL shot. And so we did our network and everything from the studio out to this particular transmitter site, which was actually 3 transmitters. But what blew the whole deal was they didn't have reliable composite over IP yet. And so I was using links, brick links. And the problem was we had to put the stereo generators at the transmitter site. And so we couldn't get the RBDS data from the automation out there to it. So I had to hook the automation system, which was on a private link, up to my Ubiquity link. And I lost my isolation right there just to get RBDS data out to those stereo generators.
Yeah.
Was your RBDS TCP or were you doing serial? What were you doing?
It was just we could do it either way, but the automation was talking to it was just sending out the data of the commercials and everything through network over to the stereo generators in the rack that all STL'd out to sites. But I had to put the generators at the site for that. So it just went into the data port on the brick link. But I had to hook it to the network that all the automations were on to do that. And the isolation between the studio to that one particular site then got hooked into a different set of network stuff. It was in other words, the music was just audio over the D-Link, but now I had to hook it to the data network.
Yeah, I've had a couple of instances where I did a version of isolation by taking the metadata and not driving it TCP, but driving it serial and then only taking a 2-wire, one direction serial feed, and then converting that back over to make sure that I had some kind of isolation, some kind of one-way isolation out of the studio toward the transmitter.
Yeah, I
Well,
had so much trouble getting our automation. It was the old next gen system, and I had enough trouble just getting that to talk into a regular RBDS generator. And so to do that conversion, I had to get it fixed. So I just plugged it on in and said, guys, keep it isolated as best you can.
Okay.
couldn't
Well,
you?
Mark?
Oh, I was just going to ask, couldn't one carve out a VLAN to carry your metadata over separate from everything else? Means you've got a different network.
Well, I was on the Ubiquity, so it was totally isolated. But like I said, back at the studio, I was feeding the audio in out of a limiter through the BrickLink. And now I had to put data into it that I had to gather from the automation system. So I had to make a network connection to
Gotcha.
that.
I gotcha.
Okay, let's jump back to Wayne if you're willing, because I think this is very interesting. A lot of people know about this site. A lot of people don't know how simple it is to find open stuff.
Okay, well, let me share a screen here, and hopefully you'll see that momentarily.
Yeah, that's the good barracks you've got. That's like mine. It's got the little screen on the unit where you can see your data.
So anyway, I was preparing this presentation. So I just, again, I use Barracks often. I'll use Barracks, I'll use Tyline, others that are popular. But, found a particular device. And then, of course, shows you can drill down with Shodan to find out more information and so forth. And of course, what are the active ports which are going to be tied to a service? And finally, we get down to there's no credentials. And I think by the title that this device was named, this is one end of someone's STL link. Now, this is not there anymore, so you won't go take that IP address and find this now, but at least the day I was doing that, basically there it was. And, Shodan is, of course, one of many, many tools. It's pretty popular. So I tend to use that, for demonstration. And one of the things maybe is misunderstood about Shodan, really all it is a search engine. So what you're doing from a user, you're querying a search engine just like you maybe query Google with some search term for some information, except with Shodan, you're looking for IP host devices.
What's the cost on that?
Well, Shodan is free in its basic form, which you can do several searches. I think they have a limit of how many you can do within a 24-hour period. And then they have different levels that you can give them some money and have more features and capabilities. And particularly if you're going to use the scripting, where now I want to use Shodan to look for devices with default logins. You can pay some money for that. But one of the points that I try to make with Shodan, one of the things you're concerned about is what is your public internet visibility of your infrastructure? And likely you're always going to have some type of visibility. And the point is you want to know what that visibility is and be sure that you've taken precautions to protect that. But things happen, things change. You do a software update, and all of a sudden you have a new set of defaults that you may not be aware of. And Shodan is, again, a pretty cheap way to basically do a kind of a high level penetration test, particularly looking at that outside visibility into your infrastructure. And I guess while I'm in here, I'll skip through this. Here's some thoughts about kind of talk about what things you need to do. Here's some of my list of things, and of course, that's a fairly a fairly long list of things to do to protect the network. And then I said, if you don't do anything else, you pretty much got to do these 5 or 6 things. So just some kind of thoughts here, kind of off the cuff.
Well, I sure appreciate your sharing this, Wayne. I know you do an awful lot on IT security, and that's just real important.
And I'll throw in a little plug here, if I may, with if you happen to be in the Wichita, Kansas area next Monday, join me and others at a SBE Ennis workshop at the Kansas Association of Broadcasters annual conference.
Okay.
I just brought up that Shodan screen, and it's just got a window to put in what you're looking for, or
Whatever that search term is you're looking for. In my case of my example, I just simply put in barracks, but you could put in Nautel. You could put in some keyword, your station call letters, which I admit one time in a live presentation, I put my station call letters in, and by God, there popped up my automation server.
well, I
Which
just did
was,
barracks, and man, it's thousands of stuff here.
well, the day I did it was, I think, 1,400 and something. I don't know what it is today, but
It's like a massive, like a pinger.
again, what you're doing is querying a database. So, it's when was the last pass that Shodan bot made. And again, Shodan is not the only tool. There's another called Census, which is a very similar type system. So you're just querying that database. And if you keep putting different search terms in there, you'll finally get the little message you exceeded your limit for the day. So that's kind of what I'll call the number of free things you can do.
Well, I put barracks in, and the first one on the list is Cox Communications.
Yeah, that's probably referring to the internet service provider rather than who it is. Most likely. Well, you can pick an individual one of the hosts, and you can drill down and you can finally get down and see what are the active ports on that device, and which are then are going to suggest or identify a service that is running on there.
That's cool. Thank you.
And for those of you that don't feel you have the capability of doing it, there are folks that will do it for you, sometimes for a fee, but you can make sure that your system is clean and protected.
Yes, and I'm not a salesman for Shodan, but one of their subscription offerings they have is they will continuously monitor, quote, your infrastructure, however you define that. That might be a single IP address, that might be servers and stuff. And quite honestly, that's probably one of the lowest cost external monitoring services that exist out there.
I would have expected them to do something like that. And again, given the penetration they have in the community, that they don't have to charge a whole lot. They just do the job.
That's right.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you very much. Well, I think that about covers it. I don't know if anyone wants to offer any more stories about?
Well, Barry, I can step in and say a couple things at this point.
I was just about to ask if you were still with us and were willing, but
Yes,
please.
I'm quite fascinated by the meeting this week. The first thing is just a thought regarding network protection, and that is if you do not feel inconvenienced by the security features that you have on your network, then you almost certainly do not have enough network protection. Just logging into a VPN and getting access to everything without at least a second form of authentication is definitely too easy. I know that at KQED, they will only let a KQED computer connect to the network. That's an inconvenience because it meant that I could not connect from home until I was issued a KQED laptop that would then allow me to get into the network and do things. And that laptop has to be constantly updated. And if you do not update it, then they do not allow it to connect to the network. Also, the question came up is, do you have access to transmitter sites separate from going through the studio? And my thought on that is, if you're lucky enough to have good network connectivity, internet connectivity at the transmitter site, I know that not everybody has that. But if you do have that option, then you absolutely want to get some sort of a VPN connection directly to your transmitter sites. If your studio sites go down for whatever reason, could be power failure, could be your studio's been hit by some sort of network issue, then you definitely want to be able to connect to the transmitter sites without needing the network from the studio. Other than that, those are my main points. I can say that the first computer virus I ever dealt with, I think, was back in 1996 or 1997, and that was something called the Wazoo virus. I don't know how many people remember that one, but it would randomly insert the word Wazoo in Microsoft documents. And so it wasn't a particularly nasty one, but these salespeople all ended up with that virus where I was working. And it plagued us for months and months because they would take their documents home on floppies. And when they needed some old file again, they would plug it back into the network and we would start to get issues. I know that KQED's big ransomware attack was in 2017. It seems like ages ago now. But I can tell you as a result of that, KQED did hire a full-time network security person. And that person has been doing, I think, a great job along with the rest of the IT people there who all do a really good job of making sure the system is always updated. And again, this leads into inconveniences at certain times because KQED had an engineer that retired after me, and every computer at KQED is assigned to a particular person. And when that person left, the computers assigned to that person were no longer updated. And all of a sudden, we found that the transmitter computers, you could no longer log into them because the retired owner are responsible party for those computers. So it was an issue of we had to go back to IT and say, all right, we need access. We need to be able to log into the transmitter computers. And they said, well, we can't let you do it until we find someone at KQED who is going to be the responsible party for those. So you just have to live with the inconveniences. Some of them are little, like you cannot send executable files as email attachments, including zip files. There are sometimes workarounds, like you can change the extension on a file and sometimes it will get through and sometimes the system still catches it. But that is one of the safety things that came as a result of the ransomware attack. And the other thing that they do is they have software running on every single computer called Carbon Black. And that sits in the background and it looks to see if anything unusual is taking place on any operating computer, including installing new software. And if it is software that has not been approved by KQED, which let's face it, a lot of the things that engineers want to install on computers is not standard business network software, it will shut the process down. And you have to then apply for permission to install whatever program it might be. And again, the network people at KQED are pretty good, and they get back to you pretty quickly when you're trying to install something. And in a few cases, every now and then, they just have to turn off the Carbon Black protection and let you finish what you're doing, and then you let them know, and they turn the protection back on again. But I can tell you that the network at KQED, since the ransomware attack, has not had any problems again, and it is definitely because of the attention that is paid to that problem by KQED and their network people.
Whitelisting's good too. I use whitelists on all my transmitter sites and now even here at the studio because there aren't that many people that need to log in from the outside for anything.
Yes, but you can't use that for email in general.
No.
I've known groups that have tried that, and we had one instance here where there's a large cluster, and if you sent them email and you weren't in their whitelist, you couldn't get through. But just trying to have lunch with their engineer, and after a week or so of no response, I said, "How come you won't respond to my email?" So I never got it, and we narrowed it down to the whitelist, and I said, well, let me pose this question to you. Suppose I'm an ad agency and I'd like to place a $50,000 buy with you, and I'm not on your white list. Amazingly, the white list died about a day and a half later.
Well, yeah, and that's if you have a internal email server. I mean, we use Office 365 for our emails, so that's not an issue. But just to get into the network, the whitelists are great.
Yeah.
Plus, it keeps all the spam bots out.
Yeah. Larry, I don't necessarily want to put you on the spot or anything, but I don't remember is my problem. Did you find how that ransomware got in and diagnose that?
Well, I never heard if they found how it got in. I'm not sure that they would have told me because they might have wanted to keep any vulnerabilities as secret as possible. But I do know they do periodic testing of the network, looking for ways to get in. Um, I can give a guess that it was some sort of phishing link, but that is only a guess.
Mm-hmm.
The
Well,
FBI was certainly here for quite some time, copying just about everybody's hard drive, or at least a whole lot of them, looking for where that may have originated.
well, as you say, hiring a specific IT person just for the security aspect, that was the smart move. And it's one, sadly, that many clusters ought to do.
Well, I'm sure it's expensive to have another staff, but KQED is a pretty large organization. Another problem with whitelists is when the big virus hit back in 2020, and all of a sudden the traffic reporters were all doing their reports from home. All of a sudden, KQED had to whitelist audio boxes connecting from a whole bunch of new IP addresses in order to allow those audio devices to connect. And every time they would get a new one or someone would move, that would require an all of a sudden scramble to get their audio on the air for traffic reports.
Well, things are secure and you don't, I won't say you don't ever expect a repetition, but you have a very low chance of it.
Well, everybody has a chance of it.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
you just learn from what happened before and try to avoid it the next time. We get ours tested every day. A group called China is constantly trying to ping in.
Yeah, we finally had to actually block all the Chinese IP addresses we could.
Yeah, I'll also add that if you have a Comrex connected up to the internet, it's not unusual at all to find something connected to it. Now, often whatever's connected to it doesn't interfere with you needing to make an audio connection to it, but you can see that it has a connection sitting there, and you go, okay, well, I don't recognize that IP address.
Good to check the settings, the dashboard every so often.
That was one of the points I was going to mention, unless it's, hard coded into software you're using, changing the default port. Every piece of equipment usually comes designed to connect to a certain port. You can certainly change the port number because we have seen the times that I was working there, attacks on a given port, especially if you're using, and I don't know how many examples there are, but if you're using a live wire or using RTP as part of a 67, it normally goes to the same port, but there's no reason you can't change that. The other thing that we did on a lot of boxes was we turned off the ping service because a lot of times you would just see constant requests for ping out of wherever, and if you don't specifically need that, it's just easier to turn that off as well.
Good point.
And the other thing is because I also work for a large company, everything that Larry mentioned was also true of my company. You can only connect to the corporate network on a corporate issued laptop, and they had to see the laptop on the network. It was either once a week or once every 2 weeks, if nothing else, to download the latest virus definitions into the laptop. But if they didn't see the laptop on the network after a couple of weeks, they would automatically, take it out of the list until whoever owned it called up and said, "Hey, I can't connect." So that kind of policy, I've seen it. If you're working for a large company and you're fortunate enough to have an IT department and an IT security person and an outside service that is, testing your network on some basis, that is kind of the standard posture and whatever it costs to run a network where you're going to allow people to connect in from the outside these days.
Okay. Well, we appreciate that. Appreciate everyone's comments. And I think we had a pretty good discussion on security today. Now, Jeff, you promised us some more pictures. Jeff, are you sleeping?
There you go. Yeah, I've got plenty actually. It's going to require me going back in other words, using my phone here again, as I did last week. I didn't know you were going to.
Well, you told me that
I did. No. I didn't know you were going to come to me is what I meant just now. So otherwise I would have had it already.
Well,
I would have had it already set up there.
We can talk about something else while you.
Yeah, no, this is good.
Glad to see you got through it.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
thinking about you.
Well, that's nice of you, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was I'm going to go with no audio here. So that it doesn't interfere, so I can still go ahead and use the other. So, oh yeah, here we are. Okay, good. Yeah, let me get those pictures. Okay. Oops, wrong one. Okay. Now these are going to be kind of rough because they're inside of my phone. So I hope I don't show anything that I shouldn't show. Screen one, screen two. Wait a minute.
Well, if there are too many selfies,
Oh no, this is
we will
wrong.
call down the net gods on you.
Well, yeah, I guess. No, hold on a minute. Now, wait a minute. Where's the... Oh, man. I'm trying to find the screen share on my phone. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. Okay. Okay, well. It doesn't look like any pictures. Oh, okay, there you go. All right, good. Here are the pictures. Okay. And get me out of my way here. There's a boat I just this one here. I don't know if this one, whoops. I don't know if this boat is for sale or not. I think it needs a little bit of cleaning. Let's see here. This is as of yesterday. Let's see. Can I get a full? I don't know if I can get. This is City Island is what you're seeing. This is the trucks. They finally put the pole up. Now it's just a matter of decorating the Christmas trees, as I'm calling it.
So did you have a
some
lot
from
of
the day before there?
did you have a lot of water inside the building?
Not this time. We had 3 foot the last time and only 1 foot, in other words, outside, only 1 foot inside, showing the pump was working. But by the time, here's one of the what do you call it? It's in Sarasota. I'm trying. Where's just pictures of my oh, here you go. Here's some real nice ones. These are over in a place called Tripar mobile home. About I don't know how many mobile homes there are there, but there's probably there's 85 of them that have some kind of damage on it, plus one of my passengers, my regular passengers. Here's one. I'm not sure that this is where they left their boat. Yeah. So those are pretty much the pictures. I think. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I didn't have access to City Island last week. I didn't have that until Friday. So here, this is what I found actually when I got to the this is City Island, Ken Thompson Parkway. If you're familiar with City Island at all, this is as far as I could go. I had to walk the rest of the way to the site. And then again, I wish I could zoom out on these, but if you look over on the right hand side, you'll see that the propane tank. If you look on the left hand side, that's where it was. prior to this.
Floated it right over there.
Yeah, it sure did.
Wow. Okay.
And some of these pictures I took for people like Ben Umberger and John McMartin as well, because like we share the site with them. 1450 is the iHeart, and then ours is the 1280, and here's the diplexer for it. So I wanted to take these pictures here to let them know what the condition inside was of the 1450 portion of the site. And here's another picture of the the tank.
Now, as I recall, Jeff, you had to do some cleaning in that diplex